Hello everyone and welcome back to Rant Radio. It's just me this time, me, myself and I. This one's going to be a bit of a throwback to the good old days of the series, back when it was called Rant About It, which was basically just me rambling about a topic no one cares for about 8 minutes straight. But I thought I'd make this one a bit more professionally, take it a bit more seriously. I thought I'd talk about topics that's actually relevant to, well, anyone other than just myself. And that's kind of what I want to do with this new series, so turning this into basically a glorified podcast with just some random gameplay just thrown in the back. I got plenty of that on my storage that I need to use up. So there's not much else happening on the channel, so I thought I'd just shit this out basically, because I just want to talk to you guys, you know? It's been a while, you know? But anyway, opening rambling aside, today we'll be talking about the concept of comedy. Comedy is something that everyone enjoys to a certain extent. In the dark times of our modern world, it's important to look at our current situation through the lens of humour and as a form of escapism. The basic concept is something that almost everyone can agree on, but as far as comedy goes, that's about the extent of unanimous agreement. Aside from that, comedy is perhaps the most subjective concept that currently exists in our society. Everyone has a different opinion on what they do or don't find funny. Whether they disagree with the message of the joke, or they just don't think the joke itself is well crafted or executed. By living in a democracy, we all have the right to decide what we do or don't find funny. But nowadays this is starting to be forgotten by modern Western society as of late, as there are those who are trying to make the decision on whether or not you should be allowed to enjoy the jokes that you enjoy. This is especially true when talking specifically about offensive comedy. Offence in itself is another concept that's almost entirely subjective. So when we combine offence and comedy, two ideas that are entirely subject to differing perspectives, that is when we have to ask ourselves, are all jokes okay? Are some not okay? What's the ruling? Who gets to make the ruling? What will imposing that standard mean for the jokes of a similar sentiment or subject matter? And what do we stand to lose if this were to happen? This is a discussion that has no clear answer, mainly due to the aforementioned subjective nature of both these concepts. You'd be hard-pressed to find two people that have the exact same views on comedy and what is and isn't okay. I myself believe that comedy works best in its raw, unrestricted form. I don't find every offensive joke funny, but I believe that it still has the right to exist because of two reasons. One, there are more than enough jokes out there that do align with my beliefs and that I find funny. And two, there is someone out there that does find it funny to some degree. Most of the time, it's not even the joke being too offensive that makes me dislike it. It's usually just a case of the joke itself not being all that well crafted or delivered. I ultimately believe that everyone has the right to be offended by whatever they want to be offended by, but at the same time, people should also have the right to joke about whatever they want to as well. It's about finding a balance that doesn't give too much power to the audience or the performer. Another trend I see in controversies around offensive comedy is whenever a joke is about a specific group of people, whether that be a race, a gender, or a faith, etc. More specifically, people arguing over what groups can and can't be made fun of. Now I can understand if someone is offended by a joke that involves, say, racial stereotypes, that's perfectly fine. But in my opinion, it's a very bad idea to say that some groups can be made fun of, because then we're not really treating people like equals anymore. We're treating some people like horrible monsters who deserve it, and others like fragile infants who can't handle it. If we were to impose this ruling that certain groups are to be exempt from satire, then we find ourselves guilty of a double standard, and it is my understanding that those are bad. Now obviously there are some things that our society deems as unacceptable to say, I understand that. But I think within the context of a joke, these restrictions need not apply. Comedy is a mirror of exaggeration that we hold up to ourselves, our world, and our society. When someone makes a joke about some abhorrent tragedy, let's say, it's not an uncommon thing for someone to misinterpret that as the comedian downplaying the action. That is almost never the case. Often, the real intent is one of two things. One, to point out the humour in a dark situation in an attempt to uplift the audience. Or two, to mock the perpetrators of said tragedy, subsequently removing any and all power or fear that they hold over the victims of their actions. This is a common misconception that activists are quick to make before considering this set of variables. It's a pattern I see all too often. Now you wouldn't be wrong to assume that the extent of such a movement would just be a few hundred angry keyboard warriors pestering the given comedian on Twitter, and for that to be the extent of such an outcry. And for the most part you'd be correct. But believe it or not, this phenomenon has resulted in more than just social consequences. And we're not just talking about being harassed in the streets, but rather legal consequences. Now, if you've seen my work before, then you have probably heard me talk about the Count Dankula court case, but for those unfamiliar, I'll bring you up to speed. About 3 years ago, a YouTube comedian by the name of Count Dankula trained his girlfriend's pug to raise its paw in a Nazi salute, and uploaded the result to the site. Now, to me, the point of the joke is obvious. The humour is found in the juxtaposition of seeing something cute and innocent doing something abhorrent. The joke hinges on the audience's belief that the Nazis are bad. That's the whole point of the joke. However, when this reached the mainstream news, this fact was blatantly overlooked and the context of the joke was removed. This manipulation caused the general public who were unfamiliar with the video to mislabel Dankula as an anti-Semite and a neo-Nazi. His name was dragged through the mud, he lost his job and was arrested to later be fined £800, all over a small, ultimately harmless joke. Now, whether you find the joke funny or not, I would hope that you'd all agree that this man did not deserve to face legal consequences over the joke that he made all that time ago, especially to this extent. Since the controversy, Count Dankula has resumed making YouTube videos, become an advocate for freedom of speech, and even become a married man. I believe that any rational thinker would agree with what I've had to say today, but of course that's not for me to decide. I'm just here to present my opinion on the matter, and it's up to those listening to decide if what I think is right or wrong, and to present the reasons why they think that. Remember, the best version of our society isn't one where everyone has the same opinion and agrees on everything, but rather one with people with conflicting beliefs can coexist peaceably. Subjects like this have helped me realise the true power of perception, and the impact that can be had in the lapse of critical thinking. I think it's important to take a moment to think about anything you find offensive, why you find it offensive, and whether or not offence was the intent of the performer in question. In this dark, divided, unclear world we live in, it's critical that we take a moment to look at our situation from a fresh perspective and to laugh at it every once in a while. That is something that I think and hope everyone can agree on.